But let's identify very spontaneously for you, what is the most important when we are talking about gaps between us, between the Nordic countries and Baltic countries? And I will start with Professor Aidukaite, please. Maybe you would.
Hello, everybody. I have the pleasure to contribute with a chapter to Human Development Report. And my chapter was about social policy development in the Baltic states. And here I just shortly summarize what happened in these Baltic states within 20 years of period in order to clearly identify these gaps between Nordic and Baltic countries. So, three Baltic states within this 20 years period developed somehow into a more neoliberal welfare state type. It means that there's responsibility of the state to guarantee well-being for its citizens and more responsibility of individual responsibility. And this is clearly felt if we speak about housing policy. For instance, privatization of housing policy is also one important feature why we have such a high outward labor migration in the Baltic states. Also, it's felt, we can feel it in education policy, healthcare, and also privatization of pension insurance. And scholars, even when we compare, for instance, 8 new member states, we always group three Baltic states together, and we call them like neoliberal welfare state. And mainly they look into social indicators like minimum wage, expenditures on social protection, level of decommodification. And in this sense, Baltic states are labeled as neoliberal, but for instance, Slovenia, Czech Republic, they are labeled as socially conscious and compulsive member states. So we have another development here among new member states. And then Poland and Hungary is somewhere in between, like conservative corporatist welfare state. But when I study social security systems of the Baltic states, I really cannot label Baltic states as neoliberal. We still have quite developed a social security system in our design. If we look, and all citizens are still secure in all social risks. We have pension insurance, we have unemployment insurance, and for instance, family policies. They even look like some kind of close to social democratic welfare states. So we have quite generous social family policies. But the problem is that the social security doesn't function as it's supposed to be and does not generate outcomes, what we all want to see. And here we have very clear division between western part of the Nordic Baltic Sea region and eastern part of the Baltic Sea region. And we even can call, we even can tell that we have two regions. One is welfare, social security expenditures are very high in this region. Poverty level is very low, it's lowest in European Union. Longevity is very high. And then we have another side of the Baltic Sea region where poverty is highest in the EU. Social expenditures are lowest. Minimum wage is lowest in the EU. So we even can talk about two regions, but not about one Baltic Sea region. And there are many reasons why we are so different, and there are historical, economical reasons, but I just want to highlight probably for me as a scholar the most important reason, that it is low social citizenship and very low trust in major state institutions. If we, for instance, ask citizens in the Nordic countries, do you agree to pay more taxes in order to be secure and on social risk? Majority would answer yes. I trust state, I trust social insurance institutions, I will pay because I want my elderly parents to be taken care, my children, I want my children to have free education. But if we ask this question on another side of the Baltic Sea, majority would answer no, because I don't trust the state and I just don't trust social security institutions. So I think this is a major difference and this is a major problem that has to be solved in the future if you want to have one Baltic region, but not two Baltic regions, on the western side and the eastern side of the Baltic Sea.
Nestor, it seems that politics is a very important factor. That's my personal opinion, that there has been Soviet socialist states. We have been all involved in that. And there is sort of fraction that we regained our independence. So socialism was something which was not, let's say, that successful model for a development for a country. What do you think about this? Is this kind of fraction that we are very liberal? Maybe it's related to this heritage, Soviet heritage.
Maybe it's more. It's not so easy to find yourself in the market economy and democracy. It's not so easy, and that's why our knowledge about how to behave, what to do, or even how to vote is different. The Nordic model is based in a very strong social, and this Nordic social model is based in a very strong civil society. How I like to say that, you know, people understand, even in all Baltic states, that they are going to vote, and we are in the parliament and we vote again. That is very simple democracy. The Nordic model is based on agreements. The people are going to vote to parliaments, and politicians, employers, employees, organizations, they try to agree something. And these agreements are more clever ways to do politics. For example, just one example, a few years ago, very tender issue, even in the Nordic countries, the modernization of the labor market. And the top word in Europe is flexicurity. Flexibility and security in the same time to the labor. I know there have been a lot of discussions in Denmark, in Sweden, in Finland, everywhere. In Estonia, actually, government agreed this flexicurity model with unions and employers. The law was in the parliament, we are voting for that, and after 6 months, the government said, oh, you know, the security part of this agreement, we don't like it. And just flexibility was the result. Social Democrats walking out from the government, and in the Nordic countries, such political parties, I don't know, Joakim, what will be their future if such an agreement will be just fired by the politicians. In Estonia, who cares? These ones who, for whom this agreement doesn't exist actually as a basic thing, and the result in the parliament elections was actually better than it was before. So the strong civil society thinks more on agreement, to do more agreements, not just to do the law.
All right. What about when we are talking about the caps? What about education, Professor Heidmets? We like to say we are very smart. We have been very educated even during the Soviet period.
That's true, but I'd like to start with this very notion of cap, because my understanding is that this is a somehow controversial construction. If we are talking about the cap, we are mainly mentioning the GDP, income level, salaries, and this is true. There is a good point cap. But if we are looking at some other aspects of social life, say education, there is nothing which might be called as a cap. If you look at schooling years, all the states are doing as are Europeans, and if you're looking at the results of the PISA tests, all Europe should catch up with Estonia. So it means that this indicates that in the Baltic states, society seems to be somehow unbalanced in some fields of social life. We are quite advanced, and in some other fields we are lagging behind. And this seems to be that's a state of unbalanced society compared to our Western neighbors. It's something peculiar for this region, and I think that we have to learn or to adjust to this sort of social model where, let's say, we are well educated, we have more or less the same values and needs, but we don't have money in the pockets as they have. So it seems that I don't see that the situation, this sort of unbalanced situation, will change during years. Maybe it takes some decades. Income level will be the same as in our Nordic neighbors. So the challenges, from my understanding, how to adjust, how to be happy in a situation where actually we are somehow being in an unbalanced society.
It would be nice to think that we are the best in singing here in the Baltics, and our culture is so rich and so on. But still, the economy is an important element in our life. I would ask about the economy, Professor Varblane. The idea about having opportunities. What is this situation in terms of our opportunities here in the Baltics?
Okay, I am continuing where Professor Heidmets actually just finished. And the issue is what is the main problem in Baltics. We have not enough abilities to transform our knowledge and skills into revenues and money. That is the main point, because there are so many issues which are related. What is the role of companies, Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian companies in global value chain, and what is the position and how we can actually increase income by changing our role in global value chain. And what I mean by that is that if you look now, the majority of companies which are working now in Estonia, if you look what is the role, big part of those are actually so-called OEM, original equipment manufacturer role. What it means, they are producing purely products. They are not in the part of designing, engineering of products, or in the part of selling actually final products and earning profit margin on sales. And simply speaking, if somebody is working, let's suppose, in town Valka, which is Latvian, we have border town with Latvia, so if somebody is working in furniture factory and producing a product, and basically with its work, he or she is increasing value-added per employee in Denmark more than at home. Why? Because it is owned by Danish company. Actually, the final product is sold by Danish company. The profit actually is recorded in that company. And that is a main point now, how to shift your role in global value chain. And of course, there are many strategies how to do that. I don't know, now maybe it's not the right place to continue, but we may come back to that later.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So what is the European perspective if you had all these comments about caps in different regions? So as there is common Europe, and even Barroso was quoted here that inclusion is the factor. So what do you think about this statement delivered by Barroso? Kadri is candidate. European Commission, and you're working for the DG Regio.
Regional development. So we look at what needs to be done from the perspective of regional cooperation. And for me, actually, the bigger question is not to try to identify the gaps. I think we're pretty good at that. We're pretty good at measuring ourselves against our neighbors and trying to aspire where it looks better. For me, the big question is how. We've had 20 years of practice. I've spent 10 years in the finance ministry, so I know my part very well. Estonian Finance Ministry. And now in the regional development part of the European Commission, I have the chance to work with the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region. And I see that the strategy came to life because there was 20 years of trying to cooperate, and there seemed to be a consensus that it's not enough what we are doing. We are doing a lot in various fora, but it's not enough. Not enough. So the Commission was asked to help along to put in place some kind of a new cooperation framework, hoping that this will help us overcome the obstacles to cooperation which were there. Now the strategy is in place. It's been there for the last 2 years. And we are seeing the first results. We see that there is a lot of political commitment to cooperation. I think every politician that spoke here today is extremely committed, and whoever you ask, everybody says yes. Cooperation with Baltic countries or in the bigger Baltic area is very necessary. Yes, we want to do it. It's very high on our political agenda. But what we see in the trying to deliver the Baltic Sea strategy, where every priority area has somebody in charge from a line ministry in one of the countries around the sea, is that things are not really happening as fast as the political commitment would hint it would be. So there is something missing. Some people say money is missing. I'm not so sure. In 2007-13, at least from the EU side, 50 billion euros was given through various EU programs, most of it through the cohesion policy, to regions and the member states around the Baltic Sea, 50 billion euros. This money had been given already in 2007, so when the Baltic Sea strategy came around in 2009, all the countries were encouraged to then use this money and also give support to Baltic Sea projects. And very few have actually done that. The Commission now sees that we have another chance coming up next year when the next 50 billion, or something in that magnitude, of the next period of cohesion policy starting in 2014 is going to be negotiated, and we've turned it up a notch by saying that in the next period cohesion policy, the Baltic Sea strategy has to be taken as part of the strategic planning, as part of the decision making on where this money is going. So we really hope to see then that people will put the money that the EU is giving them to match these political priorities. So for me the big question still remains. I mean, we have the political will, the money is there, but there is something still missing. We don't see that the civil servants are really jumping on an occasion of cooperation. But then, with a positive note, whenever I go to one of the regions around the Baltic Sea to visit projects, we have excellent, brilliant examples of projects which do Baltic cooperation. My favorite example is the Baltic manure, which is helping to pick out and support the development of best treatment technologies for treatment of manure, so that chemicals wouldn't end up in the sea. Excellent project, good for the sea, but also good for, I guess, R&D and developing ways of handling production waste. So we have many examples like that.
Professor Palme, here, when we have this big crisis here in Europe, we are talking about, I guess it's already a reality. We should have a common fiscal policy in terms of state budgets and all the deficit and all the debt problems and so on. Is there a chance to have common European social policy? What do you think, when it could be possible to have such a policy?
Well, I think the most difficult one is the fiscal part, to establish that, even though there might be some elements of that already in place. I think one should see the Lisbon strategy as a response to the idea of the euro, that you could not sustain monetary union without a certain dimension. Now it turns out that it's very difficult to sustain it even with this kind of social dimension, even if it's sort of fully developed. I don't share Professor Åslund's positive view of the future of the euro. I think it will continue to struggle with the fact that countries are so different, so that there will be continue to be imbalances and very different needs for different countries, and you cannot have that sort of solved with a common monetary policy. That should perhaps increase the scope for social policy in order to, and fiscal policies in order to use that kind of instrument to sort of balance the macroeconomic economies of the business. But I think that the main problem is that the countries have not adapted their social policies enough on the national level. I think before we enter into the endeavor to establish social policy on the European level, I think that number one, I agree with the President, we should change the cap, because that's a huge social policy with perverse effects. So before we can get rid of that, I don't think that we should engage in another business of doing sort of European social policy. But rather to push the reform agenda in each individual member state, and trust that if we can show good evidence for good policies, that we can actually use the European arena as an instrument for policy learning.
I read many newspaper articles, especially Americans. They like to say that there is now a decisive moment to see what's going to happen in Europe in terms of social policy. Building welfare state is in danger, they say. And now I would...
Can I just quickly comment on that?
Yeah.
I mean, the clear pattern is that the biggest welfare states are in best shape in financial terms, the Nordic ones. So this is American perspective. I think is perverted by the American sort of focus on their own system.
Still, when I was listening to your speech, so maybe it's a sort of provocation, one idea came to my mind. When we are looking for the model for us and we are admiring your model there, maybe there is another question. Maybe your model is too expensive. It's not valid in our modern world. Maybe it's too much, and you should lower your standards. There, in an obligation.
You are.
What? Do you have any comments on that?
I would like to. 10 years ago, I was somehow involved via World Bank in Deutschland's pension reform. It was in Munich, and we are in the panel, and common value euro was just something new 10 years ago. And in Munich I say that, on my mind, in near future we will have, if we have now common currency, on my mind, in near future we will have, for example, common European pension age. It doesn't, there will be differences between the pension systems in the different states, but some kind of common numbers in the social life, it's normal part of the common European future. And even now, when we see these problems with euro, all the basic problems are based on that we are not so integrated as this common currency need. And we try to do something to behave with these regulations what we have nowadays. It doesn't work well. They can work, but not well. That's why I think that even to believe that to have common currency and 15, 17, 20 or 27 different fiscal policies and tax policies never works. But about the welfare state. In Estonia somehow also was very popular last month to discuss about European social model, the future. Dear friends, believe me, to think that we can be competitive with Asia, for example. Jesus Christ, I don't know how the people can think even so. Don't know. For me, is the funeral of the European social life never will happen. Typically the Nordic way to behave, you have a strong fiscal policy and a well-regulated social policy. It's possible, it works. And this is actually the European biggest, this is our future in the world. But to think that we are competitive with Asia, with low salaries, never existing pension systems, without the health care, it's impossible for Europe. It never happened.
No, I am simply thinking that what Eiki Nestor mentioned, that we may have a common social policy for Europe. It also, or pension rate, so common pension rate for Europe, it also should have a prerequisite that also average age in countries is relatively similar, but it's not the case now. So that takes time. But I wanted to come back to this issue about funding and Asia and the future of Europe. But I am not so sure that Europe is able to keep this type of model like it is now. And I agree that Scandinavian countries have been very good example how they survive. But now if you look now, Irish minimum wage level, 1,462 euros is minimum wage level. In France it is 1,365 euros. And now thinking about this Asian threatening, and thinking about that in France, average hours worked by employee per year is 1,460 hours. And in our case, 1,900. So basically, average Frenchman is working 500 hours less per year than somebody in Eastern Europe. I think this kind of model simply there is some kind of convergence, and convergence is not one side totalized. So we meet somewhere in between. That is what I think will happen in the future. Because the outside threat is so deep. Of course, there is another option, completely different option, that Europe is not giving up. I don't mean that social model is radically changed quickly now, but there is something which is coming from your model which you showed, this life cycle of Modigliani applied to social funds. But issue is, what is the money content of this loop down and loop up? How much it costs? Because loop is the same, but figures are different. That is what I think is a threat.
Would you like to comment?
Yeah. I want to encourage discussion because otherwise it's something we don't raise high points here.
Would you like to?
Well, my simple comment here is that, of course, if we cannot compete with high productivity with Asia, we will have to adjust wages. There's no, and of course, China has now 150 million people, at least, living on European standards. They will become more. So this is something that we will, and China is now a high wage country in the Asian context. Other countries would follow suit, and then we will have a very different world for 2030, when we will meet next time to discuss 20 years experience. And the key, can we adapt to this? Can we change our institutions in order to, as I think, in the end, adapt our economic lifestyle? But my simple point is that high taxation or not, if we don't deal it with the public sector, you would have to put a burden on the family, and then you would have low female labor force participation if you're taxpayers, or you use the market, and some markets are efficient. If you look at the American healthcare system, it's not efficient. And if you look at the cost of the individual, it will depend on how we decide the institutions, public or private.
But one thing I would like to check, did I get it correctly that welfare and competitivity, or how we call it, competitiveness, those are controversial things. Was it your idea?
No. Well, for example,
you can't compete with Asia in that sense.
You know that the Asia's development is based on resources, and they are large resources. European development is based on limited resources. It's the biggest difference between these two parts. And for example, this healthcare example is the best example actually. You know, all the studies you can find lots of them, and you will see that to have a healthcare system, we are taxpaying. We are special tax, for example. It's more efficient than everybody pay themselves for the bills. It's never be efficient, even if we are talking just about the efficiency.
Any other comments? Yes.
Can I just add? I mean, the thing about efficiency and economic efficiency, and I'm very far from Mr. Varblane being an economist. And this is where EU has helped the Baltic countries on the eastern shore quite a lot. I mean, we have to make the most out of the few resources we have. And I think the biggest resource we have is human resource. And we're not doing very well on that, are we? At least in the Baltics, in the free Baltics. And we need to be honest. I mean, without the joining of the EU in 2004, and I was working in the finance ministry with introducing the EU cohesion policy money, it was such a huge change in the mentality of public policy that now, since EU is giving us the European Social Fund money, now we will actually seriously start to think about training and retraining of the short or medium or long-term unemployed. I mean, we jumped a bit there, and that was very good. We were pushed to do that maybe 10 years earlier than we otherwise had done. So making the most out of the resources, we have the models there, we have the examples there, and we have money from EU. So why don't we just do it?
I just wanted to maybe explain that I don't mean that we don't have hope at all. It is not my meaning. My meaning is that there are different resources which we can use. We have capital, labor, and knowledge. Knowledge is very spectacular, because if you use knowledge, it's not disappearing. It is improving here if you use knowledge. And therefore, the whole future of Europe is to rely on knowledge. And that is not equal to simply human beings. It is the quality of human beings which matters. And now the issue, what makes difference, for example, between Nordic model and Central European or Mediterranean Europe, is investment into future growth, investment into knowledge and the ability to use knowledge. And that is what matters. And in that respect, we have to learn how to use that. And in that respect also, I think that a knowledge-based model of Europe is too much on paper and not in reality. And in the first or previous panel, we had here discussion why Europe is not meeting 3% GDP is expenditures of research and development. Of course not, because Estonian European companies simply don't invest enough into that. But now, why? Because they have done different model. They have invested into China for looking cheap labor, for looking cheap capital flows. And so basically this is something which in short run gives you actually positive feedback. But in long run it means that all research is running away from Europe, following all investments into China and India. And that is where we should react. In Europe, being honest, there is one project which is, or proposal which is called Future, Future of European Manufacturing Industry. And there is very clear point. We have to fight against the process companies running out from Europe. Now we should come back to companies and ask why you are running away from Europe. And we should ask these questions from companies. Why do you feel uncomfortable in Europe? What is it? And that is, I think we leave it open. I don't want to continue.
Yeah, Professor Heidmets.
I would like to continue because not only companies are running out, but also people, of course.
Yeah, it is all part.
Okay. And it seems that if we are thinking about the outcomes or what the gap is doing with us, one very obvious result is that it makes people to move. And from one side, we are happy that our young people are going outside and taking degrees and so on, but we are not so happy when they are not coming back. And I think the challenge is to somehow to find the mechanisms how to compensate this gap, because we may lose those potential brains who are actually able to move this society. And I think that one thing we have to do, we have to create stories. Right? We have to create stories.
Maybe success stories.
Not success stories. We have to create stories telling, especially the younger generation, why they still in the first place to live. Why they have to open their business here? Why they have to raise their families here? So and there have been some attempts to somehow to answer these questions. The idea that this is a most great place in the world, and some people are thinking that this is the most business-friendly place. And I think that this sort of compensating stories, which are telling that in spite we don't have enough money, but we have this and this and this, and this is why it's the best place in the world. So I think this is a challenge for this region to somehow compensate those gaps we actually have, and those gaps will stay for a long time.
It seems we have identified two trends. One is that European money and European business goes to Asia, hunting for cheap labor and so on. And there is another trend. We, the Baltics, we went to hunt for this Western welfare, and that's a problem for us. So that's a paradox for European integration, that as we are more integrated, we have more opportunities to hunt for welfare and to leave Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. What do you think about that?
I just want to say that we should see positive and negative sides of migration, and until our region will be so diverse and so unevenly developed, still will be migration, economical migration in the region. But I see also positive sides. For instance, in Germany there is a lot of medical doctors, and I just saw a program on TV that there are too many medical doctors which are unemployed in Spain. So there are some European Union programs, but these doctors, they are learning German, and they are so happy to go Spanish doctors to Germany and find working place. But of course, for example, in Lithuania, recent survey showed that 70% of citizens would like to leave the country if there would be a possibility. So this is, it's not necessarily they would leave the country, but of course this shows some sadness for politicians, for policymakers, that there has to be something done. It's not only words like you should come back to Lithuania because it's a nice country, but there should be some economical policies and public developments in the country that support these migrants coming back. And one of those ways, housing policy, also education policy, because it became more liberalized, and for many students it's probably cheaper to go to France to get education than to stay, for example, in Lithuania. So this is something to think for our politicians and policymakers.
All right, so please be prepared for some questions, but I give for Professor Palme.
Yeah, since I'm from the future studies, I feel obliged to have a positive attitude towards the future. And I see a number of opportunities for Baltic countries to make more jumps for the coming 20 years. And I think that part of the problem is that you were sort of prisoners of an old economic system, and the transition has meant that now we have a generation that has been in the new economy, but part of the labor force are still sort of victims of old ways of production, have suffered from this transition in many ways. So this is a demographic problem. In 20 years' time, more or less the whole labor force will be replaced by people who have been all their sort of working life in new economy. So there'll be a massive sort of upskilling of the labor force. Secondly, I think that we should recognize that there is great potential for the brain circulation. Now you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, if we include all the countries, young people who've been working in other countries, improving their language skills. Sometimes it's in poorly paid jobs and more like a brain waste than brain gain. But I mean, we see many examples of that these kinds of developments have triggered jumps. Finland and Sweden is, I think, a great example. We took 200,000 Finnish workers in the 60s and early 70s to fill the manufacturing and the expanding public sector. And this was seen as a huge brain drain. But it was the starting point of a Finnish jump, and now they're, of course, on par or ahead of us. And this was, the migration flows did not jeopardize that, but it was part of the success story. But then you have to have, again, invest in education like the Finns are doing so well, and research.
Right, let's take some questions from the audience. Yes, that's the question.
Hello, good evening. First of all, thank you to all panel participants for really very interesting contributions. My question is general. I don't know who would respond. French president, when speaking about the future of social policy, mentioned, I think, a very interesting factor which also will influence the social policy. He said that we can't expect that a family which lives, with 4 persons family, 2 parents and 2 children, and lives in 60 square meters apartment, we can't expect that they will take their elder parents to live with them. And there is quite a big part of society, let's say in France, which lives really in these conditions. Is this factor of living conditions, meaning our square meters that we live in our private houses or we live in our block apartments, is this a factor that is being looked at by academics, by those who make focus for social policy future? Thank you.
Thanks. Any comments on that? Do you explain? How it looks as an indicator to talk about. There are, I guess, different data available from different statistics. Do you remember any statistics on that? But it seems to me that in Paris there are really departments, or those apartments are very small, relatively. Family rooming just 40, 60 square meters.
Well, I think in most countries that come across in my work probably applies more to the older members of the European Union. Housing is a whole area of policy making. The conditions, the square meters, privately owned or rented, and all of that, it's a really big part of the discussion. Maybe compared to the discussion we have in Estonia, it's less. Social housing has a much more specific meaning in Estonia. It's meant for seriously in trouble people. But when you say for France, housing for them is a whole lot.
I guess there is a paradox in terms of housing, because that has been our ideal for our families to have huge houses. And if you take your model in Sweden, I guess family houses are relatively small. So here is the difference.
I think that Sweden is a particular country, or I think there might be similar patterns among the Nordic countries in the sense that housing policy was very ambitious in the 60s, 70s, and we had inflation, which means that people who are now just retired were able to buy big houses. So they live alone, or just two persons in big houses. And that is a problem in terms of giving young people access to enough housing so that they can afford a family. But I think it's an illusion to think that we will restore the three-generation family in apartments. I started out as an economic historian studying family farming, household formation in the culture in the 19th century Sweden. And it was clear that the generations did not live under the same roof. There was a separate little house for the old people. And I think that it's not only a matter of square meters, but the kind of social space that would have to be huge in order to accommodate all three generations.
I think the question was about two different social policy problems. One is elderly care, and another problem is housing. And now we can turn, for instance, to the Nordic countries, because we have housing for different groups, for elderly, for students, for big families, but also they also have choices who is going to take care of the elderly. And usually this is the state who is taking care of the elderly. And if you turn to a post-communist world, we here are problems with housing and with elderly care. So usually people don't have choices in housing and elderly care. Usually they have to take their parents and take care of them. So this is about choices and different social policy problems.
Right, do we have any other questions? Yes.
I don't know if this microphone is working. Okay. So I have a question about the connection between education and then social policy concerning needs. Because we speak about possible convergence, or we think what will happen in 20 years, for example, when in China also people would like to have the same level of social security, and then even in India and so on. And maybe then also India and China will discover that they have much more cultural conditions to develop high-tech, new knowledge-based economy, and they will not expect that somebody will come over from Europe to China or India, but they just do it themselves. So I suppose that we have to be ready for much more fundamental changes in 20 years than just some catching up, continuing on the same tracks. And from this viewpoint, I would like to ask about this opportunities to have new vision supporting your idea of investment and education as a solution. Because investment and education means not only that people can have better jobs, but if we look at the healthcare, for example, then we see that healthcare very much is connected with education, not care, but health. People who are more educated are healthier. So they don't need so much health care. They take care themselves about being healthy at the age of 80 and 85. And the same is with other things. They don't need maybe so much of expensive cars, because they will be happy with much less expensive books. And with iPad, maybe they will be happy even with less and less expensive portion of knowledge to enjoy themselves in their lives. So what do you think about that? That we turn upside down this idea about education as something which is very separate, which could be very practical, only looking at the business, profits and labor market, but take also education as part of social improvement and part of the policy which reduce really the costs and expenditures of the social policy per se.
The Institute for Future Studies did a report for the European Commission on the issue of the implications of global population change for EU external policies, and we have 59 recommendations. I will not go through all of them, but one key recommendation was to, in order to respond to the fact that most engineers and scientists are now educated in China and India, if we want to be part of that development, we need to develop stronger partnerships with the higher education institutions in that region. And this should be a common European policy, because these big countries don't care about small countries up in all Europe. They want to have sort of big partners. And secondly, about things that turn out in ways that we don't expect. And we have been part of a big study on the future of forests. And the forest company planted a lot of trees in order to respond to the increased needs of newspapers in China. But as you said, young people in China, they don't read newspapers because they associate that with censored information. They read manuals.
Actually, I can of course continue from here as well, because this cooperation with China in that aspect is actually something which we have already actually behind of Americans, which understood it already a long time ago. If you look at the list of American universities positioning in China, it's much longer than European universities. So basically there is no, and I have figures about graduates from natural sciences and engineering from China during maybe 15 years. And it is growing like that now. So, okay, we can say that 10% or how much are really good and others quality. Even in that case, it is a huge potential which is inside of those people. So definitely that is important. But in my opinion also we have to look also into the Europe itself. Even now we don't use our resources, and I think this investment into education or investments into knowledge is something which is a way which helps Europe also out. And when we are strong enough, then we are also interesting to Chinese. And now I come to something which we haven't touched, but which is linked with social policy. It is research policy in Europe. And what is the problem? Now it's so that 5% of European funding into research is common European. We are used to think that we have frameworks and there is a huge money inside framework. It's not true. 95% of funding comes from national budgets to national science policies, which are completely isolated. There is no competition. There are all kinds of barriers to entry. And what I want to come, Europe needs real integration. And now we can come to service policies. And the European service market, we are very far from integrated service market of Europe. So basically this type of dynamos may help us also.
Yeah, there is sort of widespread belief that if you are investing in education, everything is going well. I think it's partly true, but only partly, because if you are bumping money to this old-fashioned education, it does not maybe give this outcome you are expecting. So I think there's needed sort of twofold efforts. From one side investing, and from another side renewing the content and the models of keeping education. Because I think that in spite the Estonian education, if you look from outside, it looks nice. But if you are going deeper from inside, there's a feeling that there's still 19th century. So to adjust the education models to the 21st century, I think it's also the same importance as pumping more money into this field of social life.
That's an interesting point. There is the question still how to adjust. Is it kind of, it seems to me when we are talking about good education, there is a danger to establish a campaign, to say that we should, let's do it, but without any reality check, I would say. So how to avoid this kind of being an object of common control, having commons, having instructions, having a plan as we have during the Soviet period.
Actually, this is a very long debate. Should education be sort of based on interest, or should it be based more on sort of obligations? You have to do this, you have to learn this. But it seems that there's a paradigm that is shifting today, more sort of interest-based, creative-based, innovation-based approaches, also in a primary and secondary education. So, but the shift in the field of education is very, very slow, because it's one of the most conservative elements of society.
All right, there is still, I guess, 3 minutes or so, but let's try to conclude the panel. And let's be more general than just talking about education. There is a good term you use, this social investment. I would ask finally, what do you think? What is the best mechanism to make decisions on those investments? What would be your advice for the real situation? How to make those social investments we really need here in the region? Let's start with Eiki.
Let's start with something even more simple. When we built up and discussed the unemployment insurance system in Estonia years ago, so it's two ways to behave. One way is to explain it that if the people are unemployed, they need some benefits, some incomes, and so on. By the way, it's more understandable. That's why we are paying money to this insurance system. But there is another way to explain it. This is an investment to keep the people, unemployed people, in the labor market, to not lose them. It's a big investment to the future. And by the way, I try at first to explain this, to use this second way to explain this. I never succeed on that. And then I finally understand that it's more easier to explain why this insurance system, why we need it, is more in more simple way. But in reality, it's a very big investment, especially in Europe or Baltic states or even Nordic states.
Yes, I guess I would like to conclude with, I mean, in today's world, some people think that, at least for the small countries, a better internal market, more European integration will help to overcome some of the domestic problems, and I've heard it say today as well. I would actually recommend for the Baltic Sea region to take some initiative. It is a region that is on top of the world more than just geographically. It has some very good statistics speaking for it. It has a lot of potential. To wait for Europe to come and, I don't know, put our noses together to cooperate, I'm not sure is the most efficient way. I think there are some obvious cooperation areas. I mean, you ask about making social investments. I do not understand why in small countries such as Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, we don't have a widespread cooperation network based on long-term cooperation agreements between all health services providers, so that one hospital in one capital can have the highest high-tech, the best doctors in one field, and in Riga is another one, and we just swap the patients. Maybe we have it and I haven't heard. I would be so glad if it's there. This is, for me, this is so self-evident. It's good economic sense, it's good public service, it's not bad in any way, so why don't we just do it? We don't have to wait for EU or anybody to come and show us the way. I mean, there are some good cooperation projects. I'm sure Swedes would benefit by cooperating more with what we have to offer from the other side. So I think the Baltic region should just show the way.
Just one remark. It would be nice if we agree these things between the biggest hospitals in Estonia.
I'm not sure if I have the best recipe how to implement this productive social investment welfare state in the Baltic states, but I think Baltic states, they still keep Nordic model as a reference model for the social policy developments, and take some elements from it, like for instance gender equality policy. But Nordic countries are famous because in the Baltic states we have very high female labor force participation, and even with the aging population, we will need more females returning to the labor market as soon as possible. And here we can learn a lot from the gender equality, family policies of the Nordic countries. And another thing is active labor market policies, which are also related to productive welfare state. And these policies can help our unemployed people to return to the labor market, because today we have very high unemployment in Lithuania, Latvia, and also to some extent in Estonia. So this is my conclusions.
Yeah, I am thinking what could be the, because a recipe is too much to say. I think that what is necessary from my point of view, and what we haven't touched at all now here, is the issue that at least so it is from my point of view in Estonia, we need much more decentralization in our country. And what I mean that we should move power from central government to region level. And if we have regions which are big enough, then they can think much better about what is needed in local areas and what kind of entrepreneurship we can develop. But it means also that they should have much more power in that region. And also cooperation with, for example, neighboring Latvian regions is then much more logical. And let's take Vicen region and South Estonia, for example, then they have much more intensive also to cooperate. But this decentralization of power is something which is, what I mean by that is that now we have on the level of county level practically all kind of affiliates of governmental institutions. But what it means, they report to Tallinn and then they report to another government institution which is located in that county. And basically they maybe they are only 300, 500 meters far away from each other. But all this management structure is built so that they may talk with each other, but it is some kind of free will, but not so logical development of this management structure. And in my opinion, this type of energy, which is in regions now, is not used completely in our society. And maybe very soon it is already too late to do that, because there is no intelligent people anymore, I could say, in many places who have a knowledge which is not used. Because that is, in my opinion, very crucial point here.
I would like to point out one sort of historical advantage of small nations. This is ability to speak many languages. Usually Estonians have to speak 3 languages, 85% in society. And I think this is sort of advantage. If you are going to labor market and if you are speaking not only English but also Russian, so I think we have to keep this and this is quite I think quite unique competence or ability.
Oh.
Maybe this is echoing. Napoleon said that when China awakens, the world shall tremble. But we have this professor of Chinese language who says that don't tremble, learn Chinese. And this is the way forward.
That's a good point to conclude. Thank you so much. I hope we have some questions. So I'd like to thank all of you.